Hello, this is Mrs. Bobby, and we are going to be transforming functions today. So we're going to start right off with writing an explicit formula for g of x in terms of the absolute value of x without using the f of x notation. So that whole concept means we are going to be getting rid of the f of x piece in each of these. So it says for the g of x. So we're looking at this g of x formula right here. And what we are doing is we have our g of x. And see how it says f of x right here? That means we are going to be putting in our f of x piece. So we are going to be equals the absolute value of x, and then we still have a minus 3 after it. So that's what we needed to do there. Now, in this particular question, it says write the explicit formula for h of x. So now we are looking at the h of x one, which is right here. And in place of our f of x, we are putting our absolute value of our x. And then it says we have a plus 2 after it right here. So that's our first two things that we need to do. Now we're going to be looking at this chart. And so the easiest way in my mind to think about what we're doing is above this, I'm going to rewrite the new equation so that you can see it. So we are plugging into this because f of x, remember, is what we have at the top, the square, the absolute value of the x. And same with the h of x. That is the absolute value of an x plus the 2. So now we have to plug this in. And we literally are going to plug that in to our calculator. So we can just plug that in on our normal screen. So I'm just going to show you how this is done. So we already know the answers to these, because every time we put any number into an absolute value, it's just going to come out clean. It's going to come out positive. So that's going to be 3, 2, 1, 0, 1, 2, 3. That's an easy column. It's when we get to the next column that is a little bit more. So in order to get this absolute value symbol on your calculator, remember, this is a math one. We go over to num and see the first thing is ABS. That's absolute value. And that's going to give us that. And in place of that absolute value of an x, we are replacing it with these x values. So in the inside, see how I'm still flashing inside? I have to arrow out of it. And on a prior video that I was doing at home, you couldn't fully see the bend on that. And then now that I'm on the outside, now I can put a minus 3. Oops, delete that. Minus 3. And I push enter and I get 0. So that's my first number here. And I keep doing this same concept, math, num, absolute value, and you put the negative 2 in there. So you're like negative 2, arrow out, minus 3, and you keep carrying down this process. Okay, and you just keep putting them into your calculator. Okay, absolute value of a 0 is 0. 0 minus 3 is 3. Absolute value of a 1. 1 minus 3 is negative 2. Absolute value of a 2 is a 2. 2 minus 3 is negative 1. And 3, the absolute value of a 3 is 3. 3 minus 3 is 0. And we're going to do the same thing with this formula, but we're going to use this. And we're still going to go with that math over to num, take the ab. And in place of that, we're going to put our number. So the negative 3. We're going to arrow over and we're going to add 2. When we do that, we're going to get a 5. And if we keep doing this process, you can kind of figure it out. Absolute value of a 2 is 2. 2 plus 2 is 4. Absolute value of a negative 1 is 1. 1 plus 2 is 3. Absolute value of a 0 is 0. 0 plus 2 is 2. Absolute value of a 1 is 1. 1 plus 2 is 3. Absolute value of a 2 is 2. 2 plus 2 is 4, so on and so forth. And we fill out our chart. Now remember, at any point, if I'm going too fast, you can go into settings and you can change it. Okay, so now we're looking at the flip side. And the flip side is graphing these. So if we're thinking about the graph of these, remember, the graph of these is the same thing we just did, but our graph is y equals f of x, which was the absolute value of an x. Then we had y equals the absolute value of an x minus 3. And then we had y equals the f of x, which is the absolute value of the x. And it's not always, but that's what our question told us. And now we're going to put these into your graphing calculator. So we have graph paper that already provided for us. So this, we can go into the Y mode. Okay, I'm going to clear out what was there. In the Y mode, you are going to do the same thing you just did to get the absolute value. You're going to go to math. You're going to go to num. You're going to press enter and see I have an absolute value. In place of that, you're just going to simply touch the X and get out of that absolute value, and then you graph. And that's what it's going to look like, okay? Now, remember, if you need to know what these points are so you can plot them, there's no range. See how it's taking up the whole piece? That's because I didn't give you a certain number to go to. Like if I only said go to -4, you'd only graph it to like that point. You wouldn't have all that stuff up there. So then you go to second function graph, and it's going to give you your numbers. And then you can start plotting these. Okay, so I'm just going to put them down here. And then I'm going to start plotting. So it's -1, 2, -3, up 1, 2, 3, -1, 2, up 2, -1, up 1, 0, then over 1, up 1, over 2, up 2, over 3, up 3, over 4, up 4. You can kind of get the idea. This vector is doing this, and then you just graph it to, and you'll see what we're doing. So, and then don't forget to label these. I think on one of my other videos, I forgot to label it. So this vector right here would be y equals f of x. Now remember, we have to put the original equation, and at the top, this was our original equation, but this is what we were substituting into the calculator. And then you can go back to the graph, and I like to go to the y, and I like to take that out. But see, I can play with that because see how it's got it already? I can keep arrowing over until I'm out, and then I can put a -3 on it, and then I can graph, and that's what this one is. So if you notice, this graph from this one is just shifted down 3. Because when the number's on the outside of the absolute value, that's a downshift. This would be an up 2 shift from this. So this bottom graph is going to take place starting like up here. That's where that one's going to be. And this one that we just typed in is 3 down. So 1, 2, 3. And then everything kind of falls suit with it. So then I'm going to go second function and then the points. And then I'm going to start plotting these points. So this one's going to be like -1, -2, -3, 0, -2, -1, -1, -2, 0, -3, 1, -2, 2, -1, 3, 0, and then you can kind of get the idea that this vector, this absolute value one's going like that, and you can just kind of carry it all the way up. And you can just follow the patterns. Up 1, it's up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. And you can see the pattern. These are like baby slopes. And you just keep going. And then don't forget, we want to label it. And the next one would be y equals f of x minus 3. Because on a Regents exam, they're not going to, they're going to be like, hey, you didn't label your stuff. You're not getting full points. Then you can go back here and you can get rid of your 3 and get rid of your minus sign. And you could, by deleting, and then you can put plus 2 in your graph. And you see, it's up 2. It's right here. So we can go second function graph, and then I can start graphing these. So it's like -1, -2, -3, up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, -2, 4, -1, 3, 0, 2, 1, up 1, 2, 3, So you can get the idea. Same pattern. And then we're just going, hey, look at me. Look at me. I'm happy vectors. And the cool thing is, they're all positive. See how the fronts are all positive? There's no negative in front. If there was a negative in front, these wouldn't be facing upward. They'd be facing downward. Okay? So that's what our part right there looks like. So now we're going to look at the E question. Okay, so I'm just going to move my dot cam down a little bit. And it says, what is the relationship between this graph, that top V, that you can just look above, the top V and the other one? And the whole concept being is that if it's absolute value, basically the vector, it's going to be up. It's going to be translating upward. And if it's less than a 0, if the absolute value is a negative, then it's going to be facing downward. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. So the relationship between this is like this is positive and it's facing upward. And so this would also be facing upward, but this right here means it's facing upward, so it's going upward, but this means that it's whatever number's here, it's up on the y-axis more. And if that back k was negative, then it would be down on the y-axis. And I don't mean facing down, I mean like down. See, remember this? Down when it was the -3, and it was up when it's positive. Okay, so that's that. Now I'm going to flip the page. Okay, so on my flip page, it says exploratory challenge. We have f of x is this, g of x is this, with the f of x, h of x is this. Write a formula of g of x. So we're looking at this g of x one. Okay, and it's got a 2 here and then the f of x. Well, the f of x was still an absolute value, so this g of x is just going to be g of x. We still have this 2 floating out here, but this f of x is an absolute value. And we just have to write it, write the equation out. It says, write the formula h of x. So now we're going to look at the h of x one. And it's this, so this is just going to be a half of x. Now, these mean something. This right here means, and I'm just going to do a little sketch, the vector is going to be very narrow and long, whereas a half, the half one is going to like widen way out. So this is when it's like a fraction. It's like, it's not going to be that nice little vector. It's going to be like, it's going to be a fat one. And when it's a whole number, it's getting real skinny. Okay, so just so you know that that's what that front number is doing. It's stretching it out, and that's what it's going to be doing. Okay, so looking at the value in the table. So remember how above we wrote the equation. So right above this, I'm going to put g of x equals 2 absolute value of x, and then h of x equals a half, and then the absolute value of x. So we know these answers already. Absolute value of 3 is 3, 2, 1, 0, 1, 2, 3. There's never a negative. Whereas this one, we got to put this into the calculator. So we go to the y. I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to put a 2. And then I'm going to put math, num, absolute value. So let me try that again because it was in the light. So I'm going to go 2. I'm going to go to math, num, absolute value. And I'm going to put an x in it. I'm going to get out of it. And that's 2 absolute value x. Now, watch this graph. It's going to get real narrow. See how it's not as wide as the other vectors were? This is a pretty narrow graph. Okay? So I'm going to, we don't have to plot these, I don't believe. I think we will eventually, but right now we're just going to be looking at the points. So another way to get the points, instead of putting them each into your calculator, is after you put it into your calculator, you go to second function table, and then you can see all of these answers. See, when x is a -3, y is 6. So we have to make sure that we put our values in. So we have to put in every one of our answers, and you can just follow suit right down. Just make sure your outside numbers are matching with what you need.